Hey honeys, I'm excited you're here. This is our last episode of season 1, but don't worry, we're coming back for season 2 in March. In the meantime, if you like what you've seen, head over to Patreon. There's a few more episodes and some behind the scenes. You don't want to miss it. Now, to today's episode. This is Jeremy Chen. We worked in the trenches of the weekend shows together here in Vegas. We talk about being pushed to the limit. We talk about burnout. We talk about restarting, and we also talk about suicide. This episode is for everyone who's been pushed to the edge, wondering what's next. Jeremy, we went through it in Las Vegas.
Oh, we certainly did.
It was definitely a time. If I compare my two stations, Las Vegas and Louisiana, those are my two favorite markets. But Louisiana gave me a kick in the butt in a very different way. It was like learning how to be an MMJ, how to do my job, versus Las Vegas. It was all a matter of how do you keep your sanity while trying to maintain and juggle so many different hats that you're wearing. And you were there through a completely different administration, and then you kind of were there when we had nobody leading the ship for a while, and then you got out of your contract luckily, and then hopped over to Connecticut, and that's where you've been for the last couple of years.
Oh boy, Vegas. I will tell you this. So, here in Connecticut, this is my fourth news station. I've been doing it. I can't believe it's like 10 years now that I've
Wow.
been doing news. So it's kind of crazy to hear, the journey, kind of look back at the journey and everything like that. But I would say Vegas, for you and I so we kind of overlapped kind of like my last year, essentially, kind of like my last year in Vegas. And as you mentioned, yeah, it was a very different news management during that time, as opposed to, when you came in and then we had just had a few months of no management. There was like nobody. We had interims of GMs and news directors. So it
Yeah.
was kind of the Wild West during that time. But, it was one of the most challenging times. And I felt challenged, not in some ways a little bit with my skill set, having to, pick up new skills and everything, which is a good thing, but also in other ways of like, okay, we don't have resources. You're asking me to do all this stuff without backing of anything. I'll see what I can do, but it's not going to be honestly as good as whatever anyone else is putting out there. But I'm just going to do my darnest to try to make it work in some way, shape, and form. So it was a lot of thinking on your feet. It was a lot of, I guess, managing the managers. Essentially,
Yes.
they expect the world.
Managing the expectations is really what we got good at over here.
Exactly. And that was, and the phrase managing your managers, interestingly, came from this news anchor in LA when I was in college and I interned at CBS. There's this guy named Juan Fernandez. He told me like one of the skill set that you won't necessarily learn in school. And this really applies to life, really, not just in news, but it's like learning how to, manage expectations and everything, especially you're in a situation where, there's expectation here. They try to shoot for the stars, which is understandably try to shoot for the stars. But,
Sure.
as you work through, your news gathering and everything, okay, this is what we're able to accomplish. This is not what we're able to accomplish. How can we still make the best product possible while trying to, manage everything? I really appreciate that piece of advice that he gave me. And that's something I worked through. And when I be my managing the managers, I wanted to be like, a team. I work with, whoever my direct manager is, try to be like, hey, I wasn't able to get A, B, and C, but I was able to get X, Y, and Z. And then from there, we can try to make a good story out of it. But in Vegas, it got to the point where I felt, I was kind of out on an island by myself. And I don't think COVID during that time. It was during the height of COVID. So we were all working remotely and everything. And it was very difficult to try to manage those expectations when A, you're in a situation where really no one has ever experienced before, and B, what does news look like when there's a pandemic, we're stuck at home. Granted, I had permission kind of permission to like go outside and interview people if I needed to, but how do we distance? How do we do this and that? Doing a lot of Zoom interviews, what do you do? So I think that was one of the most challenging moments. And when they want, you to get X, Y, and Z and everything like that, it may not be possible because you're not physically talking with the person or you're not able to gather what you need. It was it was really, really tough. But I will also say, like, being able to think on my feet, that was a skill I really had to develop. Nothing like, I learned in J school or anything like prepared me for what I experienced in Vegas, but learning from my mistakes, learning from, the missteps and everything like that, I think that's ultimately the one of the key experiences I got from Vegas during that time. And I want to be very specific. It was that time kind of before you came along to our
Mhm.
station during that time period with a whole different management.
True, because I came in right after everything started to open up in Vegas. So it was still kind of pandemic, but it was right outside of the pandemic, 2022. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely 2022. So it would have been, yeah, it was my last.
I went from such a closed off newsroom during the pandemic in Kentucky to walk into the Vegas station and like everything was open, everybody's chatting, everybody's doing things. And I was like, wow, this is completely different than the way we were handling things in Kentucky. And so it felt like, business as usual. And I came in and I was kind of like on an island like you, right? I was just getting back into news. I didn't have anything that I really wanted to prove or own. I just wanted to do my job, get in, get out. I appreciated the management for finding me, reaching out to me, seeing the vision I was doing with my podcast then, and saying, we like to see it happen and come to life here. I've mentioned this multiple times on this podcast. It never came to fruition. Unfortunately, that management, everybody got fired, everybody got let go. And then it was like the Wild West. The managers that we did have came over from other stations after being let go. And so it was kind of like a chest puffing out situation. This station did it better. No, this station did it better. And like we couldn't quite find our footing, right? In this chaos of it all. But we had to keep producing and we had to keep doing what we were doing. And we were working together on the weekend, which already feels like a whole island because we have no management there. We have
Oh,
nobody working in
absolutely.
the newsroom. Go from a fully robust newsroom Monday through Friday to Saturday walking in four people, three people in the newsroom, me, you, the producer, and then Russ, right, who was our assignment editor, and an editor that would walk in, but they sat on the complete opposite side of the world, and that was it. That was it. That was our weekend.
It was our skeleton crew, but we were, small but mighty, and you know what? We got stuff done. We got stuff done. I will tell you that.
We did. I mean, we were producing things for I mean, the Lake Mead lowering lake levels, then we had the dead bodies that were showing up from Lake Mead. Then
Oh,
we
the
were
dead bodies.
covering and every time those dead bodies would come up, they were always happening on a weekend, and then we had to keep track of which one, who was going out there, how can we advance this? And with a skeleton crew, you're doing a lot of thinking and a lot of pivoting without resources, right? And you
Oh,
were
absolutely.
you
I
were great
remember
on that.
one year, one time, one of the bodies, showed up, but it was more like skeletal remains. And what was it? It was, I think I had to drive. So thankfully, we had our photographer Rudy. Still, he was about to leave, but he got called back in, and then I drove. He drove first to Lake Mead because I remember we were driving separate cars. So
Mhm.
I had to drive, as he was making his way over there. And I remember I'm just like driving by myself in the pitch black because
I
there's like no
remember this
lights.
live shot. I
Yeah.
remember this live shot. It was we couldn't see a single thing, but we had to send you out for an 11 o'clock live shot. Okay. Now, guys, we all understand that news is live. I'm a proponent of live shots. I love me a good live shot. But let's be real. It is a Saturday night. We're trying to get you out to Lake Mead, which is 45 minutes away from the station, for a 3-second live hit. Like literally, that's it. Because you were out there for maybe what, 15 seconds? 20
Yeah,
seconds is
live
all we
for
had
like,
live. And
yeah.
then, like, that's it, just to show something. And I mean, you were standing in the pitch black. There was nothing to
There was
show.
nothing to show. There
Nothing
was
to
literally
show.
Like, Rudy and I were like, we're standing on this, like,
I'm
empty
gonna go
dock.
back and find this live shot just to show everybody. There was
Yeah,
nothing to show.
there was nothing to show, and, Rudy and I were, like, standing on this empty dock, and we were like, "What are we showing?" And the only light I remember, I think there was only, like, 2 light sources. Like, obviously, Rudy's camera was one of them, and then out in the distance was, like, this houseboat, like, some kind of party was going on over, they had all these lights and everything. I'm like, "What is going on in there?" And I remember texting Tina, who is the sports one of the sports reporters
Right.
at the time. We were texting each other. I'm like, "Oh my god, I don't wanna get killed out here." I'm, like, texting her and everything. I'm just like, oh, like, it's just us 2 in the pitch black in Lake Mead talking about bodies, and hopefully we're not the
We're
next
not the
ones."
next bodies to be found in there. Yeah. Well, because listen, and there's always again, we go back to kind of what the things are in news that make sense and what calls in news don't make sense. There's like if there was a scene out there, if police was out there, if the forensics team was out there, if there was a setup of some sort, that would make sense for us to send you out there. But it would make more sense for us to for you to have done a look live, right? Where we recorded a little bit earlier and then we send it back versus sending you out on a Saturday 45 minutes away from the station to for 20 seconds of your time to go out there live in the pitch black because we couldn't see anything anyways, honestly. And it would have made more sense for us to send you early in the morning when the sun is coming up and said, hey, Jeremy, go home. Let's send you out, I don't know, 5 a.m., 6 a.m. even. That would have made more sense than what we did. But we don't always make sense in news. We just want to get out there and show that we are there.
Yeah, it's just about showing, like, we are present, we're there, we're on top of the story and everything, but behind the scenes, logistically, as you mentioned, yeah, I want to be able to show, hey, this is where the crime tape is. This is where it all is. I remember the issue was like we didn't even know exactly where at Lake Mead they found it. There's like, oh, it was like around this area. I'm like, well, what area? Like we can't see anything. Kind of more positive outlooks, like, okay, at least I'm getting overtime for this.
Sure.
That's kind of I was trying to like think, okay, it's not the ideal place, but at least I'm getting overtime because
Absolutely.
yeah, because we're 45 minutes away.
Well, if we have to make something out of nothing, then we're going to. And if we have to find a positive in something, and we always do, because very often in news, we are sent out to something that is, we have so many journalists on here who come on and they're like, management thought the story was this. And we get out there and the story was this. And there was no story, or this is what the public thought and this is not what it actually was. And so we still have to go out there. We have to investigate. And I get that. That is part of our job. But I think right now, even in this day and age where we are, the public is starting to see through some of these things. And they're like, is that really necessary? Is it really necessary for us to go out there and not think this through and make these calls? And so we had a lot of those calls here in Vegas.
Especially like the time period before you came, you're talking about, expectations and everything. I felt like the expectations they had did not match at the time the resources that we had at that time. And already in my head, I'm like, how are we going to accomplish, all these grand ideas if you're just sending me out there by myself? Look, I'm going to do what I got to do to make it all work, but unfortunately, if you have a station that's sending whole crews, like photog reporter crews, or another station's doing the same thing, actually there is a very high likelihood I'm going to be missing things because I'm like running all over and I got to edit my stuff. I got to do everything, by as a one man band. So you're constantly outgunned in that way, as I like to say. It's not a great feeling.
No.
It really is not a great feeling. And I can tell you for a fact, there's very few people in this business that would necessarily thrive in that kind of situation. And for me personally, I'm more of someone who thinks, more heads is better than one.
I want to go back to something that you said earlier because you said, when management would ask for ABC, you'd give them XYZ. In news, it doesn't work like in any other field, right? Like when we have these ideas of we want ABC, we want the victims family member. We want the DA to speak to us. We want police to speak to us. We want, I don't know, the dog that was barking in the middle of the scene to give us a sound bite. You know what I mean? Like it's unrealistic is the reality of it. And what we go out there, we assess what we can. Yes, we go up to the family. Yes, we go up to police. Yes, we go up to fire. But everybody's got their own thing that they're doing, and not everybody's always available. So our XYZ can be, maybe we get the neighbor, maybe we got, the janitor instead of the school teacher, right? So it's still bringing you the story. It's just not in this wrapped up beautiful package that management has in mind. And that's kind of where we would always clash with management, because they had these wonderful ideas based off of what news used to be like, I feel, right? Because we used to have resources. We used to have so many people in the newsroom. We used to be able to go out there, two, three crews, photographer, reporter, and then get all these different elements. If we're not sending those same resources, we can't gather all those same materials.
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, I think, one of the photogs at the station, I don't know if he still works there, but one of the photogs at the station, basically just went around, and you might know him by the way I'm, like, phrasing everything, but basically it's like, "Oh, they're just, they want, Vegas stories using Bakersfield resources," all
I
that
know
kinda stuff,
exactly
like,
who you're talking about.
"We want Vegas content with Bakersfield resources." So, I mean, that phrase also, like, stuck in my head. It's like one of the core memories, like, when he told me that, and I'm like, "You're right." I mean, you want Vegas resources? Give me Vegas content, give me Vegas resources, you know?
We didn't always have that, right? And so, but we did. We made it work. We made everything work. A lot of us have still left this industry and have gone on to great things. And then a lot of us have cut our chops here in Vegas and then gone on to bigger markets like you did, right? And so you went over from here to NBC, which is in the top 30, top 20. No, you were like what?
It's market 32, 33. It depends on whatever the
Okay,
Nielsen Comscore ratings. I
sure.
that's all I know,
So
but
we're coming
it's a higher
from
market than Vegas, I can
For
tell you that.
right, for reference for anybody who's kind of like, what are they talking about? We were in the top 50 markets, and in news, we go back in market sizes to go up in market sizes, right? And so we're always gunning for that 1 through 10 market because that's where we
Yep,
want to be, or 1 through 20. And
yep.
those would include like New York, Vegas, no, New York,
Nailed it.
LA, Chicago, Houston, Dallas. I'm missing somebody, San Francisco.
San Francisco, yep.
Yeah,
Boston would count as
Boston.
well.
Mhm.
So,
So those
yeah, I
are our
mean,
top
that's the
10.
goal
Yeah.
eventually
That's
for
what,
for many people.
for many people, right? And even if you don't make it into those, the resources, as you would think, as you continuously go up in market size, that the resources are there. But what we've learned in this industry is that those resources are not always there. And you are left to your own devices to kind of create something and figure it out. But I think, Jeremy, give me an idea of kind of what it's like to go from a station where we had to figure it out on the fly every time to a resource rich station like you work in right now.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this, in general, it has made a huge difference. I'm able to I feel like, to put it in a nutshell, I'm able to do the stories in a way I want to do the stories instead of, just me trying to slap something together because they still need me out in the field to, do things. I'm able to collaborate with people. I have the time and resources to be able to, make a story do a story justice, in a way, and the fact that what was it, like 3 years now. I'll give an example. I've been doing stories about every single May. I've been like heading our API Heritage Month like series of stories and everything like that. And particular stories, I'm doing them and everything. I plan them out and I give it to our managers and like, great, just let us know the days. We'll put you on the mix and we'll let you do them. And I might, work with our night side photographer. I might work with a day side photographer. It depends on, scheduling and everything, which isn't a big deal because they all shoot very, very well, just in general. But we can kind of collaborate, we can think and, do the story justice and everything like that. And I feel when you actually do the story justice, multiple things happen. First of all, I mean, thankfully I got the recognition. I got nominated for 2 Emmys, which is fantastic. It's great. Yeah, that would never would have happened in LA,
Congratulations.
not LA, in Vegas. That was
Congratulations.
yeah. And the other thing is when you actually do a story justice and it gets that recognition, people in the community actually notice. I'll give you an example. For like stories, unfortunately, of like, hate directed to members of the Asian community in Connecticut. And, I reached out to them about doing a story. It kind of went viral on social media, the initial postings and everything. And obviously, so one of my managers was like, "Hey, Jeremy, just take a look at this, see what's going on there." I was like, "Yeah, I'll take the initiative, take a look. I'll message them, on TikTok or Instagram, depending on what platform they're on." And I'm like, interacting with them and everything. And eventually, I get their trust. I talk with them and everything. And I think the key thing in terms of earning that trust was the fact that they were able to see, the stories I did back in May and everything. Like a couple people actually mentioned that. I was like, "Oh, I saw how you covered the community and everything." So we felt, comfortable speaking with you and everything. And I was like, oh, I was a little bit floored, but at the same time, it also makes sense. When you have that connection, the community trusts you, hey, we can earn that trust and then we can, do the story and kind of highlight, the issues that are going on, but do it in a way where, I have the, at least for me myself, I have the lived experiences to kind of understand and put the sensitivity and the compassion into the story to do the story justice to ensure that, hopefully they're able to get justice in some way. A beach, racist things were said to a Muslim man, and that guy wound up being arrested, I believe, a few days later or something like that. So it got enough attention and pushed, I guess, police to work on the case, and they got the guy, from what it appears. So, when you're able to do stuff like that, I feel like that kind of invigorates me, as a journalist doing stuff like that rather than, kind of, chasing crime constantly, and everything like that. But one thing I do appreciate is with our station, just constant, even our anchors mentioned the same thing, constantly chasing crime, doesn't nothing. Now, if it's like a heinous crime, unfortunately, we had a girl who, a terrible story, who was found in a bin and everything. That's going to shock the whole community, and you have to do a story on it, but you have to do it in a way that's sensitive and also raises questions about how did it get to this point. And that's a question everyone in the community wants to know, for example. So, just chasing homicides, chasing that just for the sake of chasing and going live, for that. I mean, uh, I can see where people kind of get turned off by it, because people constantly want to be like, "I want good news," and I'm like, I agree with you. I don't want to, cover death and destruction constantly, all the time. I want to cover, more positive things or things that, there's an issue and we can help solve it. And therefore, not only do we, gain your trust, but we also make an impact for your life, in some way, shape, or form.
The old news model of if it bleeds, it leads. I understand that, we tend to think that, oh, this is the only thing that grabs our attention. And yes, while true crime is still the number one genre in America and people are fascinated, I think the difference between why true crime is able to succeed at what they do versus news stations are dwindling and not succeeding in what they do is because we only allot so much time to it, right? We don't give it that time. We don't give it the resources. We think that putting it into a minute and 30 seconds and getting every police officer in there and every victim advocate on there, like that's what's going to get the impact from the community. And it's not. What we're seeing is that podcasting is getting people's attention. Long format is getting people's attention. Putting music under our videos is getting people's attention, right? Like you need to invoke whatever it is that you're trying to show. And you can't do that if we're always turning the story, or if we've got two stories turning, or if we've got three stories turning. And that was the reality here in Vegas, right? It was never we were just on one story. Likely we were on two or three stories and we still had to produce it and we still had to put it out there and then make it make sense and then not lose your mind while you're doing it, you know?
Absolutely, and still to this day, I'm kind of like, how did I manage to turn and burn all those stories during that time? Looking back, I'm just kind of fascinated. Like, man, I really did all that, but it's funny you mention that because again, this was before you were at the station, but I don't know if you worked with Joe Bartels. Yeah, he used to be.
I'll tell
Uh,
you a funny story after you finish this.
yes, he used, as you know, used to be one of the investigative reporters at the state. So he actually did a story as part of the initiative where let's do the day in the life of a reporter and everything like that. I was like, all right, let's okay, that'll be interesting to show. So he and his photographer literally came to my apartment to literally go through my day as an MMJ, go from like what was it, 10, no, 9:30, like as I'm making calls and going through the morning meeting and everything, and then all the way up until like essentially 7 p.m. when I'm like finishing up my web script, finishing up the morning VOSOC, finishing up, my web stories, also cutting the video for my web stories after the story airs. So I'm like doing all that by myself. And I mean, it was wound up being a 7 minute long piece, which I was like, dang, that's a lot longer than I thought you would actually put in it. But then they told me, "Oh, we need a completely different story because something happened with the rundown." And I literally started cussing up a storm. I'm not gonna lie. I started swearing, cussing, and everything like that. I slammed my steering wheel because my news car was in the shop at the time, so I had to use my personal car. So I was like slamming my steering wheel. Obviously, that didn't make the cut, but there was like a flash frame in the piece, and that was the part where I just started cussing up a storm, like punching my steering wheel and everything because I was just like, "Are you telling me now I have, half an hour less to put stuff together and make
Yeah.
a whole news story?" That was like,
Because that's
but
the
that
thing. It's not
yeah,
like when we're added a story that we get any more time to produce, right? We just get things added. So it's like, okay, you still have to give this story justice, but now make your phone calls and now do this and now do that. And then go drive out there and drive back and still make the 5 and 6 o'clock and then look polished and presentable, right?
exactly, and and I don't know how the hell I did it, but we made it work and everything like that. But I showed that piece to like other people I know in the industry, and they were like, "Oh my god, I'm exhausted watching that. I just feel drained. I feel tired." I'm like, yeah, we did, did a lot, during that time. I think that story that Joe Bartels did perfectly encapsulated, my time in Vegas. Thankfully, that's not the case anymore, where I work currently. I feel like I have a lot more time, and I think the key thing here compared to over there in terms of just gathering is the fact that I now have the time to talk with people as a photographer shooting video and everything, getting the B-roll and whatnot. I have time to talk with our interviewee. I have time to talk to other people, write notes down and everything like that and get a better context, better understanding of, whatever the story is, maybe stuff, maybe background that I wouldn't otherwise be able to get by myself, running around and needing to get video and edit and everything like that. So it was that was a key difference for me. And when I'm able to make those connections, I'm able to get the phone numbers, I'm able to get that because when you're going 100 miles an hour trying to get everything done, you miss those things. And unfortunately, when you're constantly doing it every single day, I want to make that clear, like every single day when you're doing that, rather than okay, this is like
This is
once.
not like a once a week type
Yeah.
thing. This is every single day we are inundated with something like this. Yeah.
Exactly. So, like here, I feel like I'm able to better connect with the community because I'm actually having conversations with them. I'm not as, I mean, there's always going to be a level of stress in this industry, no matter what. I mean, that you really can't get away from. But I feel less stress at the very least, talking with people, understanding, what they're saying and the context of the story so that I can better put the story together better and make it more accurate or have the substance be more true to what the reality is. And I think, that's the essential thing I feel like I'm able to do here for the most part. Obviously, every stage you're gonna have the days where like nothing works and everything, and that happens at every station.
But I think that that's just part of news, right? Like there's again, this is going back to there are parts of this job that are inevitable, right? That like going live on stories, it was time to go and you're like, gosh dang it, something broke and no, I didn't have this planned. I get it, right? Like, but there's a time and a place for everything. And I think in news, we exacerbate that, right? And then we try to see how far we can bring this or how much further we can stretch this. And here, in particular, it was how much more can we get out of these reporters? And it was never enough. That was the problem. And that's not a me thing. That's not a you thing. That's not a we're being bitter about it. I think everybody I know who has left this station has felt burnt out. And whether they were fired like I was, or they were left on their own accord, or they were let go at some point for other reasons, everybody that I have spoken to who's left that station has taken over a month or so to literally come back to their body and be like, what did I just experience? Because it's so much. It's
It,
so much.
it really is. I would put it best. So I was texting, you didn't work at the same time as her, but another Asian reporter at the station. I remember we were like texting each other, and you were mentioning like we constantly have so much to do, and when we reach those heights, they they want more, more, more. I felt like, oh man, like it seems like the management. What's the what does management and Asian parents have in common? And we basically said it's never enough. It's never enough. No matter what
Did you
we
grow
do.
up in a Polish household? No, it's like the Polish
Yeah.
and the Asians are the same. We get it.
Yes. So it's like never enough. So I remember we were joking about that and everything. But I will also say this: like the burnout is absolutely real, and I completely understand why people leave the industry, when they're constant, especially if I want to be also like emphasize, especially if they have family, especially if the kids, they have relationships,
Yeah.
that's a lot. And it takes a hit on your personal life to constantly having to do all of this stuff. And then go back home, you're drained, you're tired, you just basically want to fall asleep at times. And it comes to a point where for quite a few people it's just not worth it anymore, and we're losing, unfortunately, a lot of good journalists when that happens.
And we are seeing that. We're seeing that in droves right now. We're seeing the number one reason why people are leaving this industry is burnout. Because while the stations aren't able to provide us with accurate money or good money and resources, we are taking the brunt of that, right? We are still expected to produce the same kind of product with a third of the newsroom that we were working with back in the 90s or the 80s.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, in my very first markets, I mean, that was just reality. It's a small market, you don't think too much of it. It is the expectation. Maybe my expectations were a little bit, I guess, rose-colored because my second market was in Palm Springs, and it was like a dominant number one station. And for a small market, we actually had resources. Like we were next to LA, we were covering the wildfires like the big boys. I had a photographer, we were covering like they were, like with that big market energy and everything like that. So maybe coming to Vegas and experiencing all that, it gave me a whole different perspective than say if I came from a station that had even less, resources, so to speak. I will say this, like in each market, I will at least say I was able to at least get something out of it to become the reporter that I am today. And you try to constantly learn as you go. It's just unfortunately in Vegas, at that time, I felt like my desire to learn was being impeded by the fact that I wasn't able to do stories in the way I wanted to do justice
Sure.
for them. So it was more of like, okay, how do I get through the day, and how do I make sure the story makes air and I'm all accurate and everything. Then how do I make this story awesome? How do I make this story really show the viewers like, hey, there is a real impact in here, rather than, okay, here are the facts, here's what's going on, how it may affect you in some way, shape, or form, but that's about it.
But that's what they liked about you, right? And I think every newsroom is made up of everybody who is different, right? And so every reporter that we worked with had different strengths and different weaknesses. I am not the reporter that's going to go out there and just be like, bullet points and da, 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 da. Like, although like I am good at that, I guess to some degree, that's not where I excel, right? Like that's why they would put me on, yes, breaking news, but it was go get family impact, go get this, go get that, because they knew if they wanted somebody crying on camera, they weren't going to send Jeremy, they were going to send me. But if they wanted somebody to stand there and give us like the facts, then they were going to send you, right? Like we had very different strengths and very different weaknesses. And for me, standing there and like putting off facts was cringe.
Yeah,
I can't. It's just, it's not for me. And so I like documentaries. I like watching things. I mean, we are in the field where everything is visual, right? And you want me to tell a story, you're giving me a camera, then let me tell the story visually, right? Then let me show you, you should be able to smell it and see it through the screen. And if you can't, then I'm not doing my job right. But like you said, if we're always on a time crunch and we're always asked to do more than we can, and we still need to produce that, and we do, um, then something's going to suffer. Something's going to suffer.
absolutely. And I mean, I will say the one skill I was able to get was write a script in like 15 minutes. It's not the greatest script in the world, but I can pull it off. And I had to do that a couple times here, but it was more of because of breaking news rather than, any actual story I was working on. And, that's a reality that I
That's
accept.
fair.
And
That's
that's a
fair.
reality I accept, and my photographer is aware of that. He only has, half an hour to edit, and we know hand in hand, like, how much time we need to get the stuff done through communication. So, that's a reality I expect, and it's not like every single day. It's like once in a while. I'm like, "All right, it's just one of those days. We'll get through it." But when it's like every single day, you have to, use those skills. It does take a drain on you, and you're not able to really you're kinda drained from doing follow-ups. You're drained from doing, other things, so it's I would say, like, unfortunately, that was one of the things that pretty much told me, like, "Hey, I need to maybe move on, to other places and everything like that." Don't get me wrong, I loved Vegas as a town. I made so many friends, so many relationships within the newsroom at the time. We had a lot of friends in there. I think, it talked with a bunch of people and everything, especially when we were able to go back to our desks during that
Yeah.
time, make connections and everything. And Vegas, to this day is still, in terms of my personal life, one of my best living situations. And I think that kind of balance with, the craziness, the chaos at the station and everything like that. So
We had to make the best of where we were, right? And I think that's what we did here in Vegas. We worked hard. We worked very hard, but we also, not that we partied, but we decompressed very hard too. Let's put it that way, right? All of
yes,
us.
yes,
And
we
so
certainly
it
did.
definitely but there it was always in extremes, I feel, in Vegas. It was either we're high here or low here, and that's how it went. The seesaw was always like this in Vegas, right? It was never just kind of okay, it's going to be a good steady day. It's going to be this. It was always at one extreme or the other.
That kind of seesawing roller coaster, that's a lot. And for many people, that's unfortunately, that kind of inconsistent lack of consistency can cause people to want to leave the industry, on their terms and everything like that. And I completely understand because it's not easy. For me personally, thoughts in my head, like, when I was in Vegas at the time, like, can I even do this anymore? There were thoughts of that. I'm not gonna lie. But I think the thing that carried me was like, okay, my experience here and talking with other people is not the same like other people in and I think that for me was, at least for myself, the catalyst to be like, okay, maybe I can still keep on, doing this and everything like that. Because I know for many people, right there, and very understandably, that's the end of the road. I'm done.
Yeah.
I got to more move to another job that's more stable hours, of a roller coaster, so to speak. But for me, knowing that at least gave me the option. Okay, if I move to another place, let's see what happens. Take some risks and kind of go from there. Thankfully, it worked out. I'll tell you that it worked out
It did.
fairly well, moving across the country.
And let's put it this way, right, Jeremy? Because it was a challenge getting you out there because I know that you tried to break contract. They would not let you break contract. They wanted to enforce it, so you stayed and you had opportunities to go to LA and the money wasn't there, which could have brought you closer to family. but then you chose the East Coast because the family was there, or the money was there, the opportunity was there, and the station was there. And I do want to reiterate to everybody, right? Like this podcast is not to shit on the news industry. It is just to literally give you an insight into what it is that we go through. Because if you're trying to get into this industry, school does not teach you this, first of all. Okay. I didn't go to school for this, so I was totally blind coming in. But I know people who have come from school and they're like wide open eyes, like, they didn't teach us any of this. No, you're right. So let's talk about this, right? And then if you're in the industry and you're dealing with some of this stuff, then you know that this is real and sometimes you don't have the support and you don't have the systems. But I think when you had finally made the jump and you were able to leave, between you and Sinite, who worked out at Wesh in Orlando, um, the two of you would always say, there are still good newsrooms left. There are still good newsrooms left, you know? And so I appreciated that. And I don't think that the news industry as a whole is all a shithole. No, I think we've got plenty of problems that some newsrooms address better and some newsrooms don't address at all. Uh, and that's the reality of it, right? Like when we talk about the culture that we walked into, I remember coming in for my interview here and one of the managers, he wasn't there. The two managers that interviewed me actually were not the managers that ended up working with me while I was there, interestingly enough. But the one, not my hiring manager, but just the newsroom EP, right? He sat there and he's like, so this is how your day is going to go. He's like, you're going to have your laptop and you're going to have 6 tabs open, one for your script, one for the updates, one for this, and you're going to write like this, and you're going to make phone calls, and you're going to do this, and then you're going to check on this. And I'm like, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. And at what point do I eat? At what point do I piss? At what point do I even like take a break? Like, at what point do I, what? You know, and he's like, and if we call you, you have to do this and you have to do this. And I'm just like, okay, but I still signed up for this, right? Ironically enough, when I called somebody who was working here, and I think you actually worked with her, and I was like, I didn't know her. She knew me from Adam, nothing. And she came connected through somebody else that I knew out here in the Vegas market. And I called her. I said, can you tell me something about this news station? Should I take the job? And she goes, no, run, run as far as you can, run. Do not come to Vegas. And I just, I had this station, I had Denver, okay, and I had Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, all markets that I actually wanted to go to, and all larger markets in the market that I chose to come to. And I remember being at the airport and on the phone with my mom, and she goes, so what do you think? And I had two more interviews lined up that following week with bigger markets. And I called her and I said, I don't like it. I hate Vegas. I hate everything about the city. I said it's dirty, it's gross, it's got gambling, it's got everything I don't like. I said, but something in me is saying I need to be here. And she goes, say that again. And I said, everything in me is saying that I need to be here. And she took it a moment and she goes, okay, so you're going to Vegas. And that was it. There was no other discussion after that. She goes, every time your gut tells you where you need to be, it's never failed you. There's always something there. And I am glad that I chose this city over the cities that I lived in. Yes, it was hard. Yes, it was a lot of trying to make right in the community, things that were already done wrong by our station in the past. Going back to Joe Bartels, he works for Metro right now, right? And I remember doing meet and greets with Metro, and I would call them and they're like, nobody does meet and greets. And I was like, well, you don't know me, so you might as well meet me and greet with me and see who I am. And I remember he walked out, he's like, so you work for my old station. He's like, it's a shit show. And I was like, okay, well, I'm here. I don't know what to tell you. Thank you. We'll be working together. He's like, he's like, we don't like your station here. I was like, well, hopefully I will make it better.
Yeah. That sounds
So
about
this
right.
is this is what you walked into. And listen,
Yeah.
I like Joe Bartel's stuff, right? I've used his packages before,
Yes.
broken it down for
He
information. He's a
was
great
very good.
reporter. Very good at what he did.
Yeah, he's helped me
But
out a few times at the station, when you still obviously, worked there and
oh, he
everything.
doesn't work there anymore. I don't even know that.
Yeah,
See?
when he, not at Metro, but, I didn't talk with him much when he worked at Metro, but, at the station. Like,
Oh,
he helped me
gotcha.
out, yeah, a few times with, you know, angles and suggestions and, and everything like that. So I will say I will say
He
that.
was hysterical. I was like, wow, that was an introduction I was not expecting. Cause like it was one thing to hear it from somebody who was at your station, left, and then I willingly came here. But a completely other when I walk into police, knowing already that we had a strained relationship with the police department here. So they like that was the first thing that they said to us when I got there to the station here. They said, oh, we don't really have a lot of great contacts at Metro. We have this one reporter years ago who messed it up for us and all this. Not that we've done any strides by and by to make it better, okay? Because for the love of God, we've only
Yeah, I
made it
heard the same
worse since
story as well. I mean, actually, I actually had a pretty alright relationship
I
with
did too.
yeah, actually,
I
it
did
was
too, but
alright.
I made good contacts and connections.
Yeah,
And through this podcast, actually, from somebody that I did an interview with in New York, they had contacts here in Vegas. And that contact would get me every single connection with police that I needed, from former SWAT to like Metro, everybody in there. Again, you need one person. That's it. You don't need a whole slew of them. And maybe sometimes it's not even the PIO. You just need one good contact. That's it.
absolutely, absolutely, and I will say this, and this is where, you know, earning the trust of the community plays a very key part. I know for Metro Police, they really wanted to do a lot of outreach with the AAPI community in Vegas, which is huge compared to
Right.
Connecticut is tiny, but over there it's huge, and
Yeah.
it's like 11, 12, 13% of like Clark County. That's a huge number, and I remember they really wanted to make those connections and everything like. And I actually spoke with some officers and spoke with some volunteers for Metro PD who were part of the community. And when I was doing stories about their efforts, during the Stop API Hate thing, like what they were doing and everything, they were the ones that contacted me, first, to let them know, because they knew my how involved I was in the community. Like, hey, this is what's going on, just FYI, so you're aware, and everything like that. And and that was good to know. And we also did a story. I don't know if you were there at the time, but there was a horrible, like, shooting. Yeah, it was a shooting at a Chinatown restaurant. It was actually not far from our station. It was at Shanghai Taste. One of the waiters, who was late at night, he actually unfortunately was severely injured, got shot and everything like that. It was crazy, because I go to that place all the
All the
time, and I've
time.
been in that plaza all constantly. And one of the waiters got shot. He has no family here. He's from China and everything like that. Thankfully, I spoke Mandarin, and I had a very good relationship with the one of the restaurant owners, and through that, I was able to do the story. I remember one of the wishes of the waiter was that he wanted to meet the Metro police officer that helped save his life, because they responded immediately. They were like doing CPR, doing all that stuff to get him on the ambulance, so he had a fighting chance to live. And thankfully, he did. Thank goodness. But he wanted to connect with that officer. And I called up Metro Police, and they were over the moon trying to like make it happen and everything. Obviously, it depended on the deputy, and thankfully the deputy was like over the moon, like, absolutely, I want to meet the guy I helped save
Yeah.
and everything like that. And we made it happen. It just so happened the Review Journal, I don't know, just came into the restaurant for a moment, so it pushed the timeline for our story like really way up to like same day, which was a little stressful,
Yeah.
but we got it done and everything. And then Metro Police told me, oh yeah, we shared the story that you put together on our Twitter feed, on our socials and everything. And I was like, I appreciate that. Thank you for that. Even though I think the Review Journal also had something very similar, as far as the.
A win in this industry is a win, Jeremy, right? And so, knowing both of us, the relationship that our station has with Metro Police here, we were all forewarned about it, right? For the reporters in that newsroom, I think this is where like the trust of the public, like you said, and just transparency with us, how we work within our newsrooms and out of our newsrooms, how hard we work to regain the trust of people that maybe our station has wronged before. And we do. And we did. And we had a lot of great people in that newsroom who individually had great contacts because they would contact you. They would contact me, Paulina, we need a contact within Metro. Can you help us with this? Jeremy, can you help us with this? Sean Delancey also had a lot of great contacts there, right? So it's, again, we had a few of us who had very good contacts because we made it our mission to say, I know what I know, what I know. To your point before, when you said when we're so rushed, it's hard to show up on stories and then show up 100% all the time when we're on three different stories and our mind is on, and it could be everything different from like a PTA meeting to a school shoot to a shooting at, like you said, a restaurant to the next thing you're going out to, like, can you cover those puppies that were dropped off somewhere, right? And like you're needing to make sure that you're wearing the hats of all three and not cross contaminating the stories while your mind is probably in a million different places.
100%, absolutely. And thankfully during that time, thankfully I did at least have one manager who had my back in terms of doing the story justice and everything like that. And I do really, really appreciate it. I don't think you ever worked for him, George Kiriyama. I don't think you ever worked. He probably interviewed you, but I
That's
don't
the
think he.
one who was like, you have to.
Oh, really? Oh, really? That's so funny. No, he's a great guy.
Oh, he
I
was
want to be
great.
make that clear.
Listen, I had no, George was great. George was just this like the mindset of like, we should not be expecting all of us to wear so many hats, like if we truly want to do a great job, yes, we do need to understand workflow that people need to understand. You need to figure out time manage yourself, right? Like you have a deadline by this point, you have to have a script in by this point. Your video has to be in at least 15 minutes beforehand so they could check it, make sure for all these. Yes, there is a flow to everything. But in terms of what we've now done to people in newsrooms where we've just continued to add and add and add, that's where I'm like, we got to pause.
Yeah, we'll do more with less, and that unfortunately doesn't really end well for the most part. There's actually here in Connecticut, one station where they kind of, I'll just put this, I'm not going to name it, but but you can see it for yourself. But essentially, like they're really stripped of resources and everything, and unfortunately the quality kind of shows. I'll leave it at that. So our stuff compared to their stuff, I mean, there's a clear difference in the quality. So that speaks for itself. And and when it comes to local news, that's in terms of like the whole news ecosystem, that is still, you look at the polls and everything, that's still where a lot of trust is. And it's so important that we're still able to keep local news intact in some way, shape, or form, whether it be TV news or newspapers or anything like that. Because local news, it doesn't matter what party you are, that is still where a lot of trust is, because usually, yeah, there could be controversial stuff and everything, but
Yeah,
it's not like a left right situation all the time. It's like, some people, feel strongly about taxes or some building that's being built in their area, stuff
right.
like that. And that's where, trust and, accurate reporting is just so important, so that not only do people feel informed, but they also feel heard. Like they at least get to share their perspectives about what's going on and everything. And it kind of saddens me to see everywhere else around the country that local news is kind of the resources are dwindling, and that's kind of scary.
It is. And now here's the thing. I don't also want to bash the MMJ model, right? I think the MMJ model works for some people. I loved the MMJ model. Now,
Yeah.
were there days on stories, on certain stories that did require two people? Yes. And I would ask for more resources and I would ask. And sometimes I would get them. And sometimes it was like, no, Paulina, you can do this by yourself. And I think also there's this idea that like the higher in markets you go, the better the quality of photographers you get. That's not always the case because we're seeing such a mass exodus of people in this industry. Sometimes stations are just getting who they can, to kind of come on board. And so there were times when we'd work with photographers and be like, I could have just done this myself because the shooting, it's like my Louisiana shooting where my video was blue and it was okay for Louisiana, but not okay for Vegas, right? Like a market 121 versus a market 50 in the country. We should not be accepting that kind of, quality of work. And so yes and no, right? Like I think San Francisco has the MMJ model right now that they've outlined, and from my understanding, when it was being brought in 10 years ago when I was working there versus how they use it now, it's different, right? Like their MMJs don't turn day turns. Their MMJs turn like they'll have 2 stories a week or 3 stories a week. They'll have more time to turn it, to drive out there, to talk to people, to shoot it, put it together, come back with that script, kind of put some work into it. And I think that if we continue to go down that road versus trying to burn out our MMJs and see how much more we can get out of them, we're going to be more successful at keeping newsrooms alive and stable. And that's not what we're seeing right now. We're seeing people leaving because they're overworked, because they're doing the job of so many people.
Yeah, under that model, that would actually help out a lot, and you would have the time. You're not as stressed to turn something, 4 hours later, like I was doing in Vegas. When you have the time, when you're not doing like a story every single day, you can flesh out a story and get the shots that you need. That's where it absolutely could definitely work. I know what was it like Spectrum does some stuff like that. They
Mhm.
don't turn every single day. As an example, because I know a few people that work there, as well as I think CBS is trying to in the Bay Area, is trying to shift to that model. And I talked to some reporters over there where
That's
like
the
they're
one I'm
not
talking about
stories.
because that's where I used to work. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So they're not turning stories every single day and everything like that. So that's good, because you can flesh out a story and actually do the story justice and get what you need, and be a little more flexible with different shots, and take the time obviously to edit the piece properly, and everything like that. So in that model, it would absolutely make sense. We have MMJs in my station, and they're honestly they're just doing one turns. That's all they're doing. They're just doing one turn. Here's a story, you're doing one turn, and make it as good as you can possibly be during that time, with the acknowledgement that hey, you have a lot to do.
Yeah.
You do have a lot to do, but we're going to give you all the resources and time in the world to make sure you're supported and be able to do what you got to do. And it's turned out fine in that in that sense. So if I had more of those kind of days, I feel like my experience would have been vastly different in Vegas.
We talk about it with Vanessa on the Patreon. So if you guys haven't signed up there, definitely go over to the Patreon portion of this. But uh, Vegas was the first market where so many women that I knew who were working beside me were very much at the wit's end on their mental health spectrum, like suicidal. And I've worked in markets where yes, we were pushed to the limit. Yes, we saw a lot of things. Yes, we were like exhausted. We talk about it with CJ on the podcast. In Kentucky, we have a friend of ours who worked closely with us, a photographer, a friend of ours, and he committed suicide last year. And so, yes, we do see that. But I think Vegas was the first one where, I mean, we were tapping out. We were tapping out. And I know towards the end of my shifts, I think it was October, November when I was on like a full month, literally day after day after day after day doing domestic violence stories. I'm like, I haven't healed from my own shit in domestic violence of the crap that I was dealing with in Kentucky, let alone, yes, I would love to help and I'd love to have these conversations with people and continue them, but we're not even helping at this point. We're just regurgitating the same damn thing over and over. And on top of that, we're doing that like twice a day sometimes, 3 times a day, every day. The hours are long. You have us coming in at different schedules. The mental health here in Vegas, particularly, was the worst that I've ever worked in any other station.
Yeah, it's absolutely tough, and when there's no consistency, it can absolutely, and I've seen it firsthand myself, unfortunately, where it you know it just people are starting to lose it a little bit, for lack of a better term. I've heard stories, and this was before I even worked there. There were MMJs that purposely, like, you know would drop their camera so wouldn't have to MMJ. It got to that point, which is nuts. thinking about it.
We don't
But
encourage that. Do not break
we do
equipment
not encourage that. Don't do
because
that. Do
no.
not do that. But that was like a whoa, like
Yeah.
that's kind of crazy, hearing stuff like that. It's very tough, and in my own mental health was like at the time it was like, man, how do I get through this? And I know talking with my colleagues, they were kind of feeling the same way, being burned out and everything like that. And that's why you saw all the people move either out of news or they just moved to different stations and everything. I don't know if all of them are still in news. I haven't, kept up with many of them after they left Vegas, but I could see, the mass exodus definitely coming and everything like that.
Yeah. And this is I always said that Vegas is this hodgepodge of great stories and then extreme stories because it's not like we're going to get your regular one of the mill like and I say this as a journalist, so please understand me when I say this. Like we cover so many homicides that they really become just another thing that we cover. I'm not saying homicides are just a thing. No, like obviously they're tragic, but Vegas tends to take every story that you ever do and takes it to the extreme. And I think there is that component. And I don't know what it is about this state or this city and like Nevada in particular. Every story here is like it can't just be a car crash. It's got to be a car crash that like the whole family dies and then it's like somebody else, like a football player attached to it or you've got it can't just be like a child that dies. It's got to be a child that dies and is dismembered by a family member. Like it's got to be so much more extreme than it has to be that you just kind of you're like what is going on in this city, like truly, what is going on in the city, and we are the people that are watching this, we're the people that are looking at this, and here we get autopsy results. That is something that I was not expecting. I remember when we Jacob was handed a folder, right, and he was not expecting this. He opens the folder and there is somebody's dismembered child, right, and you're just like, oh, we can't even show that on TV. Why are we showing that to us? Like, can it come with a warning label at the very least? Okay. I get that we're going to see this, but can it come with a warning label? And it doesn't. This job doesn't come with a warning label.
And I think you said it best, and it gets to the point, and I really hate saying this, is like when you're covering homicides after homicides after homicides, you start to get numb a little bit, just from covering so many, and that's not a good thing
Right.
at all to feel. One thing I will say I was able to, and then this is something, over the years, I've come to realize, like, everyone kinds of knocks on doing fluff stories and everything like that, the feel good, kind of fluff stories and everything. But for me personally, and this was especially evident when I worked in Palm Springs, those fluff stories that you do from time to time can kind of reset your mental health.
Mm,
It's a feel good story. Everyone wants to talk to you. That's fantastic. I don't have to go anywhere else and one stop shop. Great. Those feel good kind of stories, covering a high school football game, everyone wants to talk, everyone wants to be on camera. Great. That's wonderful. But I also realized, those are also the moments where you can make connections to the community. That's also a very relaxed time where you can make connections with, could be, especially in smaller markets, Vegas, kind of the same thing ish, but not, to the same level. But you can make connections with the city councilman. You can make connections to, the county supervisor and everything. Like these people who, have a very big impact on your viewers and their way of life. So you can, in a relaxed environment, talk with them. You can chat with them just as humans. You're not even necessarily looking for a story, just to make that connection, and talk with them and everything. And then from there, that trust can kind of build in some ways. That's why I love covering high school football when I worked in Palm Springs. Didn't really do that in Vegas, but when I had an opportunity to do kind of like a much, lighter story, or kind of like a what we call a fluff story,
yeah.
those are opportunities to reset my mental health and be able to just start making connections with the community and feel a lot better, about, all right, I'm still able to do stories like this from time to time and keep on moving forward. And for anyone who, starts out, in the industry, don't knock on those fluff stories. Sometimes, those can kind of help you reset your mind, and potentially down the line when you have to do, more, I guess, harder news stories, those connections that you make could help out in the long run.
That is so well put, Jeremy, because I think when I go back to my mentality in like Louisiana when I was starting out in this industry, it was always hard news, hard news, hard news, hard news. And you just wanted to like bombard yourself with it. And then towards the end of it, 10 years later, you're like, oh, for the love of God, can I just get a fluff piece? And I remember one weekend or one Friday, actually, you were covering a fluff piece and I had a fluff piece that I had also like pitched. And I was hoping because it was a whole week of just covering like rough news. And I remember Terry going, we have enough fluff stories for today, Polly. And I was like, okay, another, then we're going to go in after the crime again. No worries. But I think to your point, it's so well put. We don't think about it that way, right? Like, I think if somebody then had said to me, pace yourself, don't always keep just chasing that ambulance. Don't like there's a time and a place. Those like you're never gonna escape that in news anyways. So just pace yourself. Pace yourself. And if you're out there covering it 5 days a week, then make sure that maybe your Friday pitch to the newsroom is 3 fluff pieces and let that be okay. And then do a really bomb ass job at that fluff piece, like get creative with that stand up, get creative with the shots. That's where the all the creativity and the things that you don't get to do in your Monday through Friday or your, Monday through Thursday, let that go into this piece. Let that because like that's the funny part. Like those are the pieces that win Emmys too. So like people don't realize that, but like I remember the station wanting to submit my Santa Claus piece and I was like my Santa Claus piece and they're like, "But it was shot so well." And it was like and it's true. Like it was one of my favorite pieces that I did here and it's because I was able to just take my time and it was a fluff piece. It was a completely big fluff piece. And it was those stories win Emmys. Now, I didn't end up submitting it because we submitted something else, but it goes to show that when you go back into those Emmy seasons too, it's not always going to be your breaking news stuff that goes in. It'll be your fluff pieces.
100% absolutely. And the two pieces I got nominated for, I know they would be considered more featurey. It's not hard news whatsoever. It's more featurey pieces. It's more, I wouldn't necessarily call it fluff, but
Well, that's the
definitely
thing. There's a
very
difference between
featurey.
feature and fluff, right? Like there are like your fluff pieces, like let's go to our local farm. That's a
Yeah.
fluff
So let's go to a
piece.
local bar, see what's going on,
Well, let's see what's
stuff
going
like
on, right? Like they have maybe a school bus, like that's a
yeah.
fluff piece. But if you're going into like something that's I don't know, just longer format and has some more legwork, yes, it's not an investigative piece, but there's still room for that. People like that kind of stuff.
Thankfully, where I am right now, I'm able to do those pieces from time to even if it's not like, the month of May where I'm like doing it all. Essentially, I'm like spearheading the coverage and everything, which is a lot of work in itself, a lot of pre-planning and everything, but it's very well worth it once everything comes together. And, in doing those types of pieces and as you mentioned, gaining the trust of the community, for me, and this is something I realized, later on in my career, and I will say I'm in a unique situation because not every reporter is going to have, the situation I have necessarily, as an Asian man. So every single year I'm able to go to the AAJ convention, Asian American Journalists Association convention. I can only speak for that convention. I don't know about the other affinity like NAHJ, NABJ. I hope they're the same thing for their community as well. But for me, that going to that convention, allows me just to unwind and everything like that, chat up with other people like, hey, we're going through it and everything like that. It's almost like, um, how do I put it? Like Asian summer camp. It's
Yeah.
fantastic, so to speak. So, that's a huge refresh for me. And thankfully, my station allows me, it gives me time to go and everything, which I'm very grateful for.
Absolutely. Well, Jeremy, I have definitely taken up a lot of your time today. Part of this will definitely be up on Patreon. So uh, if you guys like this episode, head on over to our Patreon because the Honey Pod has more for you from this episode that will be cut behind the scenes. Jeremy, it's been wonderful to catch up because it's been quite some time where we all used to hang out on the weekends and do this regularly. It's been 3, 4 years now almost since we've done this. So it's been
Yeah, it's
great.
been a while.
It's been great
It's
to catch
definitely been
up.
a while.
Thank you.
Many shoppers got a special surprise from the jolly old man. For 365 days out of the year, he goes by the name Richard Miller.
I work for UPS. I work in the transportation division. More towards the end of summer, and the kids will see me. It's like around the corner, Mom, Santa's here, and they'll go like, no, no, no. But like, oh, Santa is here.
But for roughly 31 days of the year, he takes on a new persona.
Santa!
Richard, or jolly old Kris Kringle, is no ordinary dress-up Santa.
Would you like some milk?
Oh, no, I got it.
Okay.
After Thanksgiving, Santa Richard makes his rounds at 23 Valley Albertson locations.
My wife has 23 stores here and 2 in St. George. So I'll go to whatever stores that, she wants me to go to. Merry Christmas, sir. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
We forget that Santa gives something bright and cheer to people's lives that are different. It takes you into a different, even when things are crummy.
But it's more than just some glasses, a red suit, and stylish Ugg boots.
Hey, bud. How are you? Merry Christmas. Would you like a candy cane?
In fact, years before his beard came in, Santa Richard was spreading Christmas cheer to those who are near and dear.
He started doing it when our kids were really little, and then he stopped for a bit because one of my daughters figured it out that it was really not Santa.
Howdy, Merry Christmas.
And then he started doing it again, probably about 15 years ago, and he's been doing it ever since.
These days, dressing up as a beloved holiday character
I like your bow.
is a small act of selfless kindness.
Merry
And I know you
Christmas.
guys don't believe this, but this man is very shy. But when he puts Santa on, he becomes Santa. And he really enjoys the kids, and he does this out from the bottom of his heart.
Because, as Mrs. Claus Jenny will tell you,
I have done Mrs. Claus. I promised I would start doing it next year with him all the time.
the holidays, while a beautiful and happy tradition, can bring out the Grinches.
We try and change the subject about what is it that makes you happy, and find something that makes you happy, because everything right now is kind of stressful with the way our lives have turned around and everything changed. But there is something good, and there's something fun in your life if you really think about it.
Reporting from the nice list this year, I'm Paulina Butska.
Merry Christmas to you. And be safe, okay?
Thank you.